Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip hip hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Genes.
Welcome to CutOff Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the co-host and co-pilot and producer of this podcast. How you doing, Julie?
Fine.
Ooh, I think I just cracked my voice. How you doing, Julie?
You sound like Marge Simpson.
I'm going through puberty yet again, or maybe it's still.
You never stopped.
When it's time to change.
Peter Brady, everybody.
Brady Bunch reference. I just saw a picture on. I follow Marsha, Maureen McCormick, on Twitter. Of course I do. And she posted a picture of all of the Brady kids at dinner at like some local Italian restaurant.
Vitello's probably.
Probably.
It's right where the house is that they're working on.
And I was so like, oh, it's so nice to see them, and they're all alive, and they're having dinner together.
Yeah, they're working on that house.
I know.
Yeah, that's over in Studio City. I drive by there every time I have people from out of town.
Yeah,
because they get excited.
I call it. I know where it is because when you look at it, there's the hill behind it. I call it Brady Hill because whenever
there's
I was
a hill behind it, I
well,
never noticed.
Yeah, it's the mountains leading over to the other side of LA. To Hollywood.
Okay.
But whenever they show the TV on the whenever they show the house on television, there's a hill behind it. Maybe you don't see. I did not grow up here, and I never. To me, that was a big deal to have a hill behind your house, and so
I'm driving over there as soon as we're done here because I don't remember a hill.
I mean, you can see those hills actually from our studio
yes,
right
I
here.
can see it here, but that's what it is. I imagining you just like a hill directly behind it.
Yes.
For some reason
Well,
whatever.
Brady Hill, I mean, Lord knows, I could watch so many episodes of the Brady Bunch over again and over again, even though I know them all by heart.
Yeah.
But do you know that those ones, like we just quoted the one where they sang Time to Change, that you can't watch those streaming anymore because the ones that have music in them, songs, they can't afford to pay or they don't want to pay whoever it is they have to pay.
You know what I heard recently, and that's interesting because all of those kids don't make residuals.
No.
Off of that. Neither do the people from Gilligan's Island,
except for Marianne.
What?
She signed. Dawn Wells signed something back at the time. She had a manager that said that she doesn't get a lot, but she still gets it. And I got that from Marianne herself. I met her at a New Year's Day brunch.
You're fancy.
I know. I'm like, oh my God, that's Dawn Wells. And sure enough.
I didn't know that.
So we were talking, and she asked me to go get her a drink at the bar. And of course, whatever you want, Miss Wells.
Well, yes, Marianne. Do you have any banana cream pie?
She looked great. She was a delight. And I'm happy to say that we had a lovely conversation. I mean, it was very fawning on my part.
Oh, God, I can only imagine. I wish I'd been a fly on that
So
wall.
she was talking about the scene in that one episode where she had to sing. Remember when they were the honeybees or whatever?
Vaguely.
And she's saying, you need me.
You need us.
Yeah. Anyway, that she could not sing. And she said, oh, that was Jackie DeShannon that did my voice. And and then she told me a story about how she was singing and there was a woman like literally under the table, like under her dress, singing under there, and years later she was in like Musso and Frank's in Hollywood. It's a restaurant, and this woman came up to her and said, do you know who I am? She goes, I'm sorry, I don't. And she goes, well, I sang underneath your dress once, and she knew exactly who it was.
I love that
Whether
story.
or not it's a true story, Dawn Wells told me that story
right,
in
so
person.
It's legit. It makes no sense at all, but it's legit.
I know, and I loved it, and I'm sharing it with our DNA podcast listeners. Has nothing to do with anything.
Because it's relevant, everyone. Wow.
Anyway, let's move on to DNA stories,
Shall
Julie.
we?
Enough about Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island.
Oh, gosh. Okay, here's a fun one. Here, and this is a sharp right turn. Authorities are investigating. This is in St. Louis, everyone. Authorities are investigating after a man said he found the body of an infant in a freezer while cleaning out his mother's St. Louis apartment after she died.
Ugh. Is this like a Jeffrey Dahmer thing?
I don't know. Adam Smith told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch that his mother kept the box in her freezer for decades, bringing it along with her throughout various moves. He says he opened it Sunday while going through her belongings after she died on January 21st at the age of 68. Oh, that's young. From lung cancer. Police said in a news release Monday that the infant was found inside a residence and that the death is being investigated as suspicious pending an autopsy. Smith says he has provided police a DNA sample. Finally, we have a reason for this story.
Yeah. Did Don Wells tell you this story?
Okay, yeah. So he provided with the DNA. I'm sure they're going to, I guess freezing preserves DNA.
I don't know, but my guess is this was a baby that she had, maybe stillborn, maybe, and that couldn't part with it or something.
Yeah, it doesn't say how infant of the baby. I mean, it says infant, but it doesn't say. It might have been a preemie that she miscarried and she couldn't.
Well, I mean, this is so gross, but like you always hear stories about young girls who either didn't know they were pregnant or they were trying to hide it.
It happens,
and suddenly they have it and they're shocked and frightened and they throw it in the trash and they find these babies and it's horrific. And I just wonder if this was something like that. Where what do you do with it, right? If
it could have been.
Yeah, I hope they find out what happened. Because a frozen baby.
Here's an interesting segue. This is From the Trenches, everyone. Here we go.
This is going to be a new segment, From the Trenches.
From the Trenches.
Shout out to Renee.
Yes, there you go. Yes. So a case that I'm working on, I'm speaking to a family member that is probably closely related to the person that I'm looking for.
Okay.
And he knows all of his aunts and uncles, and it's one of these aunts and uncles. And I have had a feeling from day one that it is one specific aunt that he is very close with. But it could also be his mother.
Wow.
The person I'm talking to.
Oh.
So, and every time I suggest that, he gets very emphatic that there is no way. I mean, he was 4 years old at the time.
Okay, so he has some memory.
Right. And he says, I would have known if my mother was pregnant. And that's legit.
I don't know.
Exactly. That's what I keep saying, and he gets very offended every time I say it. Because I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I have a friend that just a couple years ago found a half-brother, or a half-brother found him on 23andMe that is 3 years younger than him. So he was living with his mother at the time.
Right.
She was obviously pregnant.
Yeah.
And he never had a clue. So it happens, everybody. And I understand his resistance, and the whole reason for me wanting him to test is not that I think it's his mother. It's that I want to eliminate her as a possibility.
Sure. I mean, I'm trying to put myself in his position, but I'm the baby. I'm the last of three children, so I'm the youngest. I would never have seen my mother pregnant.
Right.
But I'm just trying to imagine if she didn't tell me she was pregnant, how would I know at that age what that meant?
Yes, you don't equate it with.
No.
Yeah. Especially back then.
Yeah, and my mom was always on a diet, so it's a yo-yo diet. She might have been heavier at one time than another, and I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So, I don't know. He might be listening to this. I hope he's not offended that I'm telling this story, but he doesn't. I'm obviously not identifying anybody. I never do. But it's interesting, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. And he's helping me. He's being very helpful.
Oh, good.
So it's funny how, though, at that one particular thing, he's so insistent that this person said no, so it can't be true. And the amount of times I've said DNA doesn't lie, but people do. Maybe they don't even know they're lying.
Right.
You know. So
I'll tell you what I do remember about my mother and her diets.
What?
As we used to go to the grocery store, and there was a frozen dessert. It was like ice milk or something, right? Remember ice milk? It wasn't ice cream, but it was called, they were called Tomorrows. They were like little little cup-sized individual ice cream substitutes. Sure. And she would buy hundreds of them, right? Like in every flavor.
Oh, because they were like low fat or something, and she thought that
and we would go through
food.
She was so funny about it because she'd look at the cashier as they were scanning each one of them, and she says, "Don't bother to wrap them. I'll eat them here."
love your mom. Oh my gosh.
I love that she had a sense of humor
Just all
about
of them at one time.
Right?
Because that kind of ruins the whole point of it, doesn't
But
it?
anyway.
Yeah.
But we digress.
We digress.
What other stories do you have?
What else? This is interesting. This is taken from a comment that I found in a Facebook post, so I'm not identifying anybody. It says, "What was your reasoning and why?" This person is 29. She was adopted at 2 weeks old in a closed adoption. Her adopted parents aren't thrilled that she's looking for her biological family. Her mother-in-law got her a DNA test, and she wasn't expecting anything. It turns out she had a few super close matches. So her husband and a friend of hers keep asking why she's doing this. She says, "At first, it truly was for medical reasons. Both my sons have heart issues. But now I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I want to try to fill the void of not knowing, or if there could be a relationship, or why they let me go. I don't know. I just keep telling them I don't know." So I'm left here pondering why. Why am I doing this? And I'm wondering if someone else has reasons, and just to see if they're thinking the same. So I responded, of course.
Of course you do.
As I am wont
Yes.
to do. And what I said was, you don't need to answer to anybody about why you're doing it. It's really none of their business. This is about you and nobody else, even if you're not sure why. Whenever someone questions me, I ask them, "Do you know who your parents are?" And that usually shuts them down.
Yeah, right?
Because they just can't possibly fathom. And I don't know if it's because they think that you're hurting your adoptive family.
Right.
And people have said that to me. They have said, my adoptive parents never said that. They were supportive, but it was people on the periphery that
Right.
made that judgment that this must be very painful for my parents.
Yeah, I mean, I see that there can be wounds on both sides for that, but I also think in most cases they're unfounded. You know, it's sort of out of a feeling of like, oh, well, maybe they'll love this new family more than us or something, which is, I think, is silly. I mean, you grow up.
It has nothing, and that's just it. The amount of times I've had to say, I'm not looking for parents. I'm not
Right.
trying to replace the people that raised me. Those are my parents. You don't need to say to me, and people say this all the time, well, you know who real parents are, right? Because there's other people. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. You don't need to lecture me about this. I've been adopted my entire life.
And I think that it's a valid question to ask someone who's searching, you know, what is it that you expect,
Just
or
for
what
themselves,
yeah,
yes.
what, but without judgment. Not like, in other words, why do you want to find your birth parents?
And I think that's a healthy question,
Right.
but not
But without the judgment of like, why
Yes.
would you want to do that? You know?
precisely because. And I tell everybody that I work with, really think this through, be prepared for any outcome. And I always say, expect the worst, but hope for the best.
Yeah, like anything in life.
Yes.
But it's funny that you would have to defend your choice because I think it's a really. I actually loved that letter that you read or that post, whatever it was, because I thought that's so interesting that she doesn't have the answer. She doesn't know why
We don't
exactly.
have to, and we don't have to.
But whatever it is that is pushing her forward, there's something there, and she will eventually find out why.
And there's a purity to it. There's not a darkness or an underhanded.
There's no kind of agenda that like
Yes.
I want to find out because of this.
Yes,
You know, and,
yes.
and-
It's just
I wanna
because-
settle a
because
score.
I want to know. I have a right to know who I am.
right.
It's that easy. It's
Yeah.
that basic.
Why do we look for life forms in other solar systems?
Right.
Because-
Well, or like my dad said, my dad would say, I'd say, Dad, why are you climbing that mountain? And he would say, because it's there.
right? Yeah. I still don't understand that quite, but yeah, okay.
I don't either, but my
I
dad
mean, I
was a
love
very
good-
stubborn man.
I love a good hike, but when I find out about like how crowded Mount Everest is, and I'm thinking, and people dying on there, I'm like, really? Is it that important?
Did
to
I
you?
tell you my dad climbed Everest?
No, really?
Yeah. He got to the second to last camp.
Yeah.
This is in his 60s.
Oh my God.
And he summited Kilimanjaro because it was there.
Wow. Well, there you go. Mm-hmm. He was quite an adventurer then.
He was amazing.
Wow.
Absolutely. Let's take a break.
If you're enjoying CutOff Jeans, please subscribe, rate, and review. Now, back to Julie and me.
Let's talk about how white nationalists see what they want to see in DNA tests.
Oh, my goodness. It's getting dark here.
Yeah, well,
Well, not with the white nationalists, it isn't.
it's getting lighter and lighter.
I shouldn't make light of this.
Okay, here we go.
No, because they've been in the news and there's been the horrific crimes that have been committed, and so yes, I'd be interested to hear how they can interpret
It's
DNA.
fascinating. It's fascinating. Okay, so there's this hate site called Stormfront.
All right.
And it's one of the largest online discussion forums dedicated to white pride. And people share DNA results with fellow members as a rite of passage for some members, apparently.
Is this to prove like how white they are?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Right.
Really?
So somebody wondered what happens when users' results show that they fail to meet their own genetic criteria for whiteness.
Yeah, right. Because everybody's got a little, a little coffee in their cream.
Everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah, except me. But anyway.
Because your sunburn is finally fading. She's very appealing right now.
Thank you.
Get it? Appealing.
Yeah, we get it. Moving on. If Stormfront says you've got to be all white or we'll kick you out, then how do they deal with anomalies in their DNA?
I would think they wouldn't even want to take a DNA test for fear that there is something back there in the DNA that they don't want to have
Absolutely,
brought out.
but maybe, they're not that smart. I can say that because it's true.
Yeah.
But, they probably don't even realize that because their immediate grandparents are all white.
They're not that smart from all that white inbreeding.
Exactly. Precisely. Right. So there was a study on it, and the findings were outlined in the journal Social Studies of Science that said, yes, even members who fail to meet their own genetic standards will sometimes share the results.
Wow.
In response, their fellow white nationalists tend to console them by offering potential reasons the results can't be trusted. Among them, skepticisms about the test's interpretations of science or statistics, like they know anything about science, and
only when it proves what they want it to prove.
Sure.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories about Jewish-owned genetic testing companies' multicultural agendas, and reminders about alternative ways of measuring whiteness.
Oh, I'd love to hear what these
It's
alternative
nauseating,
ways.
isn't it?
Yes.
It really is.
I'm white and I'm ashamed for that. Like, I'm not for being white, but for people that use that as a way to separate themselves from others. I just think it's
Well, and
especially in a superiority way. We're better
that's
than
racism.
everything.
That's what makes you racist.
Yeah, it's
that's
horrible.
the difference, and that's why there. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not. But I don't believe that I believe that racism is inherently about people who feel that their race is superior to the race that they are condemning. Mm-hmm. And that race has suffered throughout history because of that.
Right.
That has not happened to white people.
Right.
Especially in this country.
Right.
So you can't call white people, you can't say that people are racist against white people. Right. They can hate white people, but it can't be about race because that, for me, the definition, I don't know, we may get into something on the group about this. So whatever, we'll see.
I just heard an interview with, an old interview with Toni Morrison because, of course, they're playing them now because she just passed away. Toni Morrison was a brilliant African-American Pulitzer Prize-winning author. And, wow, to hear her speak, just wonderful. But she was talking about the fact that everyone knows about race and considers themselves a race, whether it was the Hispanic race or the African-American race or whatever, but white people, as if white is not a race.
Yes.
Because like we talked about in a previous episode about like it's the perspective of the white person that is looking at the race. So we don't even consider it.
That's very true.
But I think these white nationalists do consider it a race as the white race.
Right. I as to piggyback on what you just said, I remember when I first came to the U.S., I obviously had an Australian accent, and people would say, "Oh my gosh, you have an accent," and I'd say, "Well, you do too. It's different than mine." They'd be like, "No, I don't.
Right.
Like their way is the only way that is normal."
Yeah. This is why I feel like it's very important to travel. Because
Yes.
once you travel, you see that there are other ways of life and other cultures, and it's to me it's so refreshing.
Absolutely.
Because you can sort of live in your own bubble and think of everything in the world is just as I live it, but you see it through an opened set of eyes, and it's eye-opening.
Yeah.
Quote that. That was smart. You see it through
When
an
you see it
open
through
set
open
of
eyes,
open eyes. It's eye-opening.
It's eye-opening. That's from the file of Captain Obvious.
Yes, I tore her Valentine in two, he said half-heartedly. That's from a joke book when I was a kid.
I enjoy
I still
it.
remember it. You were talking about the white nationalists.
So some of the responses were this. Somebody wrote, "Hello, has anyone received their DNA results from Ancestry DNA, whatever it is? I received my results today, and I'm 58% European, 29% Native American, and 13% Middle Eastern. I'm pretty sure Middle Eastern is Caucasian too, as well as European. So it means I am 71% Caucasian." Yeah. And somebody wrote, "Looks like you won't be a member here anytime soon." And then he wrote back, "I'm pretty sure you are not 100% pure either. Good luck with your DNA test. If you are North American, you will be surprised how much Native American DNA you have." Blah, blah, blah. But the majority of the responses were encouraging.
Trying to
Come up with excuses.
Yeah.
Right. So this was a response from somebody. "See, this is why I don't recommend these tests to people. Did they bother to tell you that there were whites in what is now Senegal all that time ago? No? So they led you to believe that you were mixed, even though in all probability you are simply related to some white fool who left some of his DNA with the locals in what is now Senegal."
Wow, you really have to stretch for
Wow,
that.
yeah, you really have to make up a narrative that...
Wow.
Yeah. So in more than 1,200 responses, users suggested that there were other more scientific ways to interpret the results. Part of what helped facilitate this argument is that genetic data about ancestry can often be interpreted in many conflicting ways, which is true. And plenty of white nationalists are well versed in the scientific research. But as in the death penalty study, the results were far more likely to be questionable when they didn't tell the story that the users wanted them to tell. So there was earlier a thing about the death penalty thing that talks about confirmation bias.
Oh yeah. Anytime you want to believe anything that backs up what you already believe, but when you read something that you don't want to believe, even if it's true, you tend to put less credence on that or completely refute it.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's confirmation bias.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
But it's ridiculous that they would try to do these backflips to
consider the source. I mean, yeah. Yes.
Their white nationalism.
Right. Yeah, Dr. Panofsky said science cannot save us. Oh, that's terrifying that he said that. Noting that in the years since he first began working on this study, genetic tests have increasingly been used to encourage the mainstreamification of white nationalism.
Ugh. Well, this reminds me again of that. What was why can't I remember this guy's name? Jeffrey, the guy that killed himself who was in jail. The one.
Oh, Jeffrey, I blocked him out.
Well, anyway, one of the things that I read about him was that he was meeting with all these scientists at these universities because he had a plan or he had a dream.
Oh, yes, he wanted to be cryogenically frozen.
No, in addition to that, I think that might have been one of the things, but he wanted to spread his genes throughout society because he felt like he had superior genes because he was so smart and wealthy. And this is what happens when you have too much money and
a
power.
pedophile.
Yeah, well, that too. Well, that way he could also, have sex with lots of young girls and spread his DNA throughout the culture. But I really think
interesting.
but I think the idea was to have more of his DNA in the society because he was so superior.
Yeah.
And that just, again, I feel like you've got so much money and so much power. It's almost dangerous,
Oh, it's very dangerous.
Because I think a lot of the people from scientific universities that he courted thought he was ridiculous, that he was, of course, that's absurd.
Yeah.
But they were willing to take the meeting with him because he was going to, give the university a lot of money for research or whatever. So, yeah.
Money talks.
Money talks, and there's a lot of stupid rich people and a lot of stupid white nationalists. That's the moral of this story.
Stupid, stupid, stupid. Gosh.
Whatever happened to common sense, people? I really want to know.
It's gone by the wayside.
What does it matter? I mean, I would love to find out. Of course, I haven't taken a DNA test.
I mean, people are really starting to get annoyed with
I
us
know
about this.
I know.
Noticed?
But I mean, I would love to know that I have some other exotic culture in my blood somewhere, and like, oh, that'd be interesting to know.
Oh, you're half Jewish, right? Your dad
My
was not Jewish.
no,
Or
my
yes.
dad was an Irish Catholic,
Oh.
and his parents both came. Actually, his mother, my grandmother, came from Ireland, and my mom's grandfather, so my great grandfather, my great grandfather.
Your mom's grandfather is your great grandfather.
Yes, he came from Russia, basically. So yeah, Russian Jew.
Russian Jew.
Yeah, so
Sure.
I got the Russian Jewish. Irish Catholic genes. In
Yeah,
me
we need to.
that
We
I
need to
know
do
of.
your DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Who knows what else?
Yeah. Okay. Next time we record, I'll bring a test.
Oh, okay. I can't wait. I'll get my spit ready.
Let's piggyback on that. I've said that twice already.
Well,
piggyback.
we all
That
love
seems
a
to
good
be my thing.
piggyback. I can't do them anymore because, break my back and I'm too fat to get on anybody else's back. But I do remember enjoying them as a child.
Sure. So this woman said, my adoptive parents hid my racial identity from me for 19 years. Speaking of, isn't this interesting? 26 years ago, a well-intentioned white couple adopted a baby from Bogota, Colombia. However, it wasn't until the baby was 19 years old that she discovered the fact that she came from Bogota, the Colombian. They told her she was Italian. You see, my parents decided that they were going to approach my adoption as if they were completely colorblind, despite the fact that we are not the same race. This is so important, you guys. My brother who was also adopted from Colombia, but we were both told that we were Italian and Portuguese, just like our adoptive parents. Your parents' word is gold when you're a child. So true. At least that's the best explanation I have for how my parents successfully passed me off as a dark-skinned Italian for 19 years of my life. Of course, during those years, I asked them time and again, Mom, why is my skin darker or why wasn't I born in America? They always had answers. I was told my great-grandparents had darker skin than mine, but black and white photos didn't show it well, that my parents went on vacation and unexpectedly had me in Colombia. So that she didn't even know she was adopted.
Right. Oh, yuck. Yeah.
Yuck. I didn't know any better. We couldn't just Google things on our smartphones in the 90s. When I was a little girl in elementary school, I was the darkest girl in my class. We were all hanging out during free play during second grade when a little blonde in a pink dress came up to me and shoved me. You can't play with us. You're black, she yelled. Ugh. I was stunned and simply just stood there in silence. I looked down at my brown skin. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't the first time something like this happened, but unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last. She knew I didn't quite belong.
Wow. What a way to, to suddenly realize or perhaps question. I guess maybe not realize, but question.
Yeah. As she hit puberty, everyone assumed she was Latina, but she denied it. I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish. I'm Italian, she would say. My parents may have lied to me. My family may have lied to me. But during those few years of my life, I lied to myself. So when she was 14, she found part of her brother's paperwork stating that he was adopted. She searched all over the house for her paperwork, but her paperwork consisted of a birth certificate with her parents' name on it and a Social Security card, so no adoption paperwork in sight. In a further exercise in lying to myself, I decided that while my brother was clearly adopted, I wasn't. After all, he was even darker than me, and everyone said I looked like my dad, but he didn't. So with so many excuses and so many lies already swirling around, it was simple just to ignore the problem.
What a shame that the parents wouldn't have just shared that with them. I mean, I guess if they weren't going to tell them they were adopted, they couldn't possibly tell them that.
Right.
But still, it's the secrets. It never works out well, right? I mean, the secrets always come to light. Somehow there's going to end up being...
And it's always going to leave especially if your parents are gone by that point, you're not even going to be able to work through it with them. It's really sad.
It is sad.
Yeah.
But, that also brings up the question of, I do know a couple who are white and they adopted an African-American child. Mm-hmm. And so you think, okay, well, so they're being raised with two white parents. And I haven't asked them about, like, culturally, what are they going to do to introduce their child, who's clearly African American and obviously will know he's adopted,
Yeah.
to his own culture. You know,
I nowadays, I think it's part of the process of adopting a child that is racially different from you, that they have to be versed in that culture,
Right.
and be told that it's important that that child is. In fact, I have a friend who just finalized her adoption for her African American child 2 days ago.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, they're white and he's not. But it's very important to that. In fact, I'm going to do his DNA for him and build a tree so that he knows. They know who his parents are, and they want him to be as in touch with his culture. I mean, you know, they have his haircut at African American barbers.
Right.
And I think it's so important that you don't try to erase the history
Right.
of whatever child.
Because part of part of race is cultural, right? I mean, it's the way
Absolutely.
we identify with people who are similar to us.
And it makes us feel connected to the earth.
Right. It's like I'm conveniently Jewish when I need to be, and I can be conveniently Irish when I need to be.
Oh, you're so lucky.
I have a T-shirt that's got a shamrock and a Star of David on it, and it says Irish Jew.
I love it. I love it.
When I found that, I thought I'd hit pay dirt. I was like, oh my God. But just even the fact that there was a shirt like that, I thought, oh, there's someone else like me.
I bet it's pretty common.
I'm sure.
You
it
know
is.
what?
But it's not like we hang out in.
Go to Facebook and say Irish Jews Unite. I guarantee you'll find it.
If I cared to identify enough on either side, I probably would, but I don't. Isn't that sad?
Fair enough. All right.
Take a break?
Yep.
Thank you for listening to CutOff Jeans with Julie Dixon Jackson and Richard Castle. That's me.
Okay. It's story time.
Yay.
Part 2 of Patty Bevere. You guys, I know, have been chomping at the bit because we took last week off. So I'm sorry, but you'll get over it.
You can go back and listen to part 1 and refresh your memory.
Exactly.
But where did we leave off?
I don't remember.
Oh.
So I'm sorry. I meant to do that, but I don't remember. So guys, what I usually do is that I put the last few sentences of what was happening in the beginning of the next segment, or the next interview. So you'll hear it and remember what happened.
Well, here's part 2, whatever it's about.
And his mother was the lady whose picture I found on Ancestry, who I look just like. He said, do you mind if I tell another cousin about this? And I said, I don't mind. I said, but please know that, I said, I'm not looking for anything other than to figure out who I am.
Right.
He said, honey, you're a Gentili. That's who you are. And it just made me feel really like finally, in a weird way, I felt like I belonged somewhere.
Yeah. No, just to hear those words, I can relate. I remember my grandfather looking at me and saying, oh, she's a Kramer, which was his wife, which is my grandmother. And it was like, oh, wait, really? I look like somebody? It's amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
It's great to finally have a connection to somebody.
Yeah.
So we talked for almost an hour. He said, we want to meet you. I didn't know what to think or what to say. And I said, well, sure. So I told my husband and he said, do you think it's a good idea? And I said, well, I'm curious. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. So we set up a meeting at a Starbucks. When we got there, one cousin jumped up and ran over and said, Patty. And I said, what if I'm not Patty? She said, one look at you and there's no doubt you're Patty. She said, because we didn't need a DNA test to prove this. So we had a really good meeting, just talking about different things. And it was a little awkward because everybody just kind of sat and stared at everybody.
Yeah.
One of the family traits is, I don't want to call it saggy eye, but our left eye is lower than our right eye.
The left eye? It's that specific? Wow.
Yes. All of us have it.
That's so cool.
And and then we all have the exact same teeth. have like a thinner upper lip. We all have the exact same facial structure.
Yeah.
And this was all just in the first meeting. So we kind of parted ways. We've all kept in touch.
How long ago was this now?
This was I got the results on May 17th of 2017. This was July of 2017.
Okay.
So this was 2 years ago.
So go back, and now I want to hear about your family's reaction.
So the day that I got the results, I just kind of, my husband was out of town, and I took a couple days to process it. My husband and I talked about it in great detail, and we finally that weekend went to see my dad.
Okay.
And he wouldn't talk.
Did he know about it, do you think?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
There's no way he couldn't have, because I look like Benny. So there's no way he didn't know. My one sister lives with my dad and kind of helps him out because he's 91.
Mm-hmm.
She and I talked about it, and she was just completely flabbergasted. She said, I don't even know what to say about this. So she and I talk on occasion. My dad won't talk about it, and we go over there to his house, and he really doesn't have anything to say to me.
That's so frustrating.
It's very frustrating because he's the only one who's alive.
Yeah, that could give you some hint of what the story is.
Because even my older siblings who knew, they've passed away too. I have one sister who called me shortly after the results and said, oh, I hear you're playing around with Ancestry and you finally figured out that Benny's your dad. So I just kind of played dumb and said, Benny who? And she said, Benny Gentili. And I said, well, why would you say that? And she goes, oh, because we all knew. I said, oh, but nobody thought it was important enough to tell me.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that interesting, don't you? That people take everything so personally when it's not about them and it's absolutely about you.
Right.
You know?
Right.
That makes me defensive for you.
It made me very defensive too.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
So she kind of basically told me that, you're not a Howe. There's not anything left here for you. Oh, so
really?
Which, yeah.
That's amazing.
Tragedies bring out the best in people, and they bring out the worst in people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of true colors over the last 2-ish years.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So it's been an interesting ride.
Do you feel a loss?
I do. I feel what's weird is I feel more of a loss for having been robbed of knowing Benny as my father, as my dad, than I do with the other side of the family.
Right, because they obviously came with rules, and if you didn't stay ignorant,
right,
that's hard.
Right. I grieve every day for somebody who I knew but didn't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I never got the chance to know him.
Right. Right.
As my dad.
Right.
I mean, I knew, well, Benny's coming over. It's been fun getting to know my family, hearing stories about Benny. It was awesome to hear his Army. He was a World War II veteran.
Okay.
So it was great to get to hear the stories. I never knew I knew he was in the Army. I never knew what he did. He was a medic at Buchenwald. hand chosen by General Patton to go there because he could speak Italian. So that's where they kept the Italian Jews.
Sure.
So, it was great to hear that, it was just amazing to hear the things that he did.
Yeah.
He was a good man, and I feel very honored to be his daughter. But I also feel like I got robbed.
Yeah. I get it. I totally get it. Have you ever thought of writing a letter to your birth certificate dad? Maybe something you
Yes.
can just say to him. And have you done it, or just something you're thinking about?
I have written several letters and not mailed them.
I don't know. Sometimes, especially older people, are so stubborn and so closed in that, sometimes it takes some prying out, and it might just take, maybe if he has something to read that he can really process. Just a thought. I totally get it, though. What a cool story, Patty. I feel sad for you about your family's reaction.
So my story gets much more interesting too, because I decided to do 23andMe.
Uh-huh.
This past February, I got an email from somebody who said, we're first cousins according to the DNA. And I looked at it, and I was looking at the centimorgans, and I said to my husband, this guy could be my brother. It was like 1,500 and some.
Yeah, that's a sibling.
So I tried messaging him back. He didn't respond. I did some major stalking, found his daughter on Facebook, and reached out to her. And she responded right away. She said, yeah, Leo is my dad. And she said, I bought him the 23andMe test for Christmas. He was raised in foster care his whole life, in and out of foster homes. And she said, we just wanted to, find some of his family. I said, what Italian connections do you have? She goes, we're not Italian. I said, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I said, I don't think your dad's father is who he thinks he is.
So he wasn't an orphan. He was just put into foster care a lot.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So she said, that's kind of what we were thinking. We don't know of any Italian. I said, well, there are several Gentili brothers that could potentially be his father. I said, give me a little bit of time. Let me see what I can figure out. So I enlisted the help of a couple of people I know who are kind of amateur genealogists. I got information from my cousin Jaylene. We found out where he was born, when he was born, and we went through all of the Gentili men and their military records to find out who was in the UK in early 1944.
Oh, this person was in the UK?
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't mention that.
He was born in Scotland in 1944.
Oh, okay. He's a war baby.
So we said, okay, who was in World War II? That was my Uncle Tony and Benny.
Uh-huh.
And so we went through the military records, and we narrowed it down. The only one it could have possibly been was Tony.
Oh.
And I said, well, the centimorgans could be a first cousin or a half sibling. So
that's an outlier, though. That's high for a first cousin.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. So cousin Tony is still living. So I called cousin Tony and said, hey, we have a new cousin. So I'm telling him the story, and he said, you have a cousin, I have a brother. I said, well, that's kind of what we were thinking too. He said, how do I get my hands on one of those tests? And I laughed. I said, I happen to have an extra one. Can I send it to you?
As you do.
I talked to this guy's daughter and said, do you think your dad would do the ancestry test? Because the rest of us are in ancestry, and I'd like to have him in that as well.
Yeah.
I sent off the 2 ancestry tests. We got the results back, and they were like 1,900 centimorgans. That was definitely a brotherly match there.
Yes.
So that mystery was solved. On Ancestry, when that came back,
Yeah.
Leo and I were like 1,100, 1,200.
Oh, okay.
So
That's
it wasn't
definitely.
as high as it was in 23andMe. Leo and I were not as high of a match in Ancestry as we were in 23andMe.
Yeah, it's usually that way, I find, which is another reason why I tend to prefer Ancestry. It just feels more accurate to me.
When I saw the results in Ancestry, I thought, okay, that's a little more accurate for a first cousin.
Yeah. I'm assuming you haven't found a half sibling yet.
I have not found a sibling yet, no.
Okay. I thought you probably would have led with that.
When I told Jaylene that I didn't think her dad's father was who she thought he was, and she said, I bought him this test for Christmas. Could you imagine? She said, could you imagine getting these results and finding this out?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I can.
I said, let me tell you a little story.
Yeah. It's becoming more and more common. It's a whole new world. Patty Bevere, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
And that is the end of the story for now.
For now.
Yeah.
There's always more because we keep living.
Well, exactly. And Patty, hopefully things will get better within her family.
You can always hope.
Yeah, I appreciate her honesty and being so forthcoming about it. So
Thank you so much, Patty, for sharing your story with us and with everybody.
Thanks, Patty. It was great talking to you.
And
too.
as always, folks, if you have a story that you want to tell, please reach out to us. We're about to tell you how to reach out, but we love stories. You love listening to them. Please tell your story because everybody, even if you think, oh, that's not that interesting, I bet there's people out there that are going to find it interesting.
And if it's not that interesting, I'll tell you. But try.
Julie will put the kibosh on it and say, your life is boring, mister. We're not putting that on the air.
I've yet to hear one that's not interesting, frankly.
There you
but
go.
I guess it's always possible.
There's always hope, as I said. Anyway, I am Richard Castle. You can follow me on the Twitter @CastleSongs, or you can go to my website, richardcastle.com, and learn all about my piano playing and songwriting.
Extravaganza.
I'm
Julie Dixon Jackson. You can find me on the Twitter @JulesJackson with 2 O's. Find the podcast on the Twitter @CutOffJeansPod. Join the Facebook group, Cutoff Jeans Podcast. Answer the question. It'll be fun. And email me at julesjackson@cutoffjeans.com.
I'm not going to do any kind of funny lead into the catchphrase. So what is our catchphrase, Julie?
Thank God. The truth is in your jeans.